everyone? Welcome back in. It's another episode of the Wobcast 2.0 on Monday, February 26th, with some NFL news, notes, and nuggets to get to pertaining to the Minnesota Vikings and to the league in general. So excited to talk about all of that with all of you. To help me do that is my usual partner in crime and my co-host, Gyles, who is going to be excited about some news that dropped over the weekend, and we'll get his reaction from that. But first of all, we'll check in and see how he's doing. Hello, partner. How's it going?
Hey, happy Monday. And also happy Combine Week. Excited for all the different news coming out of Indy, one of the most underrated towns in the United States. So excited to see who shows up, who stays home, so to speak. I think the Combine is one of those interesting categories where, depending on the position, it's incredibly valuable. In other positions, it doesn't mean much. But I think for the Minnesota Vikings, for some of the players that they're going to be looking to draft here, come later this year, I think this Combine is going to be incredibly important for them to stay attuned. So I'm excited to see what comes out of Indy.
Yeah, I am too. And, the Combine obviously is like an NFL convention. And when you have an event like that, news comes, invariably, news comes from there. And invariably this offseason, the Vikings are going to be involved in some of the big news because the most important position in the sport, quarterback, is up for grabs on the Vikings roster. Kirk Cousins technically will not be under contract for the Vikings very soon. So there's going to be news there. And then for our money, the best non-quarterback in the NFL is under contract on the Vikings roster. But all we've been talking about with him is, when is the new contract coming, and is it going to come at all? And there's been some news on that front as well over the weekend that I know you wanted to get to, Gyles. So yeah, lots of really fun, juicy things to talk about here when it comes to the NFL and the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe we start there, actually. I was going to go with the news that dropped that caught my attention that I thought you would like. But let's start there with Combine, Jefferson, Cousins, and how it's all intertwined. Now, I did see some of these headlines, but you mentioned it kind of before we started recording, Gyles, that you feel like it's seeming more plausible, or at least more mainstream types are talking about the possibility that Justin Jefferson and the Vikings don't come to agreement on a new contract, and instead there's a different type of transaction for Jefferson that Vikings fans won't like very much. So tell us maybe what you've seen or read over the last few days that's kind of got you thinking that way.
Yeah, 100%. And before I get into the actual news, I think it's important to highlight and call out that we don't necessarily know what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's drafting and building of team style is quite yet. I mean, he's been with the team for 2 years, and I believe, correct me if you would disagree from this philosophy, but he spent the last two off seasons with all the different people inside TCO Performance Studio really getting out of the cap hell that we were in up until this point. I think he was trying to reset some contracts, say goodbye to some players, and get back into a much better place cap-wise. And beyond that, I think the one piece that we do know about Kwesi is that he's very analytic forward. He's a guy that likes to look at data and try to predict based on that data. And if you look at a lot of the teams that have went to the dance, I'm thinking of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, beyond the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes, it's not lost on us to remember that they got rid of Tyreek Hill, and a lot of people said, "Are they nuts? Why are they getting rid of Tyreek Hill?" And they went and won a Super Bowl after doing so. So if you kind of look at that lens and look at the data, I'm starting to wonder if Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is starting to take a truly unified, data-driven approach here. Whether I agree with it or disagree with it is another story. But if he's really looking at the data and trying to understand what's going to take to go win a championship. So, with that context in mind, that he's very analytics forward, it's become pretty widely reported this past weekend that Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings aren't necessarily on the same page in terms of what contract needs to be given, because JJ has been quite clear, primarily through his agent, that he's looking to reset the wide receiver market. He's looking for, from what I've understood, at least 3 years fully guaranteed. Now, I'm guessing that he's asking for a bit more than that, but at least, for as a base foundational level, he's looking for at least 3 years fully guaranteed, north of $30 million. He's looking to reset the wide receiver market. Now, you'd be able to speak to this a little bit more than I can, but if you look at it from the Vikings perspective, historically, throughout the Wilfs tenure, they have not been on board with giving fully guaranteed contracts to any player. They made an exception with Kirk Cousins, and even if you're a Kirk Cousins lover or if you're a hater regardless of whatever spectrum you're on, we weren't necessarily successful with that. Now, you can point at different things and say why we weren't successful. We didn't go to the Super Bowl, right? We didn't achieve success up until this point. That doesn't mean that we can't. It just means that we didn't, right? And the Wilfs moved off of their normally ironclad position that they don't want to give fully guaranteed contracts. So if you look at the immovable force, or the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, which one will give? Will Justin Jefferson say, all right, I don't need a fully guaranteed contract? Or the Wilfs willing to move off of that position once again? Now, I don't know. I mean, when you look at that, there's also been pretty widespread reporting throughout this weekend that the Vikings are opening the idea of trading Justin Jefferson for, I'm guessing, quite a big haul. Now, whether that's the right or wrong call, it's kind of an interesting moment because I understand both sides of the fence. When you're JJ, you're the best non-quarterback in the NFL, at least into this point, and I'm guessing that he can continue on that position for a hot second here. But I also understand the Wilfs side of the fence, where a fully guaranteed contract is not something you just want to hand out willy-nilly. Furthermore, if you understand how the salary cap works, if you hand out a fully guaranteed contract, you as the Wilfs need to go find all of that money and put it into an escrow account. It's not like, all right, I'll pay him in 3 years. I'm committing to that, but I don't have to find the money for 3 years. You need to find the money today and put it into escrow account. So you need to be able to come up with a lot of liquid cash immediately. So I understand all the different reasonings from both sides of the fence. But at the point of the conversation today, it is kind of a tenuous point. Which one is going to give? Is it going to be the Vikings or is it going to be Justin Jefferson?
I don't know if it's true that he wants 3 years of his contract fully guaranteed or not. If they came out and said that and confirmed that, I missed it. So, but even if they didn't do that, it could still be true. To me, that's inside baseball. That's just bad business, I think. And I get that the Browns did that with Deshaun Watson, but for agents and players to start thinking about that and wanting that, even floating it out there as posture, I think is just bad business. And I think it's a bad idea for teams to hand those out.
Yep.
I think there are you can guarantee it for certain things, guarantee it for injury or guarantee it for whatever. But to just fully guarantee a contract, I think, is opening up the Pandora's box that shouldn't be opened. I don't like that at all. Now, it doesn't matter what I like and don't like. It is what it is. If that's what they want, that's what they want. I am very pro. If analyzing it for the Vikings, I am very clearly in the camp of you should re-sign Justin Jefferson. But if it takes a guaranteed contract to do that, I'm in the other camp. I wouldn't hand it out. I just wouldn't do it, because I don't know where that stops. I mean,
I completely agree.
Yeah,
especially if your idea is to trade him 2 to 3 years into the contract or do anything with that. It really locks you into very limited options. And I think as a general manager, if you're looking at it from Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's lens, you want to give yourself options. Now, I think a lot of people have looked at this with criticism throughout his first 2 years in the NFL, but I actually look at it with a little bit of commendation that he has been able to ride that competitive rebuild line fairly well, in the idea that we have been competitive even when our starting quarterback and our starting wide receiver, I mean, heck, every first position of our entire offense was hurt for a good portion of this last year. Our quarterback won, our wide receiver won, our running back run, our tight end won, our offensive line was hurt at many points, and we were still able to have a decent record. So the point is he's been able to really ride that line very well while still resetting the salary cap, still remaining competitive. He's, to put it clearly, he is put the Vikings in a position where they have a lot of options, right? And if you sign someone to a fully guaranteed contract, especially at that dollar amount, you are limiting your options of what you can do with him down the road, right? Yeah. You are taking away that flexibility. And I think that flexibility is a very valuable thing in the NFL. Unless you feel like this year is your win now window, I think it's a bad idea to take away that flexibility.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing is the Vikings have the leverage right now in these negotiations. He's under contract next year, and they have the franchise tag.
Yep.
Like the leverage is on the Viking side, and And the risk right now is on Jefferson's side, because every time he steps into a weight room, a practice field, a game field, the crosswalk of a busy intersection, he is assuming risk of being hurt and rendered unavailable or unable. And at that point, his value plummets.
Yep.
So there's no reason the Vikings should hand out a guaranteed contract. There's nothing to compel them to do that.
No, correct. The only reason that you could ever muster up is to keep him happy, and keeping him happy obviously is good for the locker room, but I don't think that should be dictated based on a $30 million a year cap hit, right?
Yeah,
I want to keep him happy, but that is not the number one priority.
So, right. Right.
So I do believe that the Vikings are in a good position, though, because even if they cannot re-sign him, he is still such a valuable asset that he would yield such an enormous return. Now, to be very clear, I'm on your side of the fence here as well. I would like to re-sign Justin Jefferson. I think he is an amazing player. He's an inaccuracy eliminator. If you do decide to go get a quarterback, whether that is number one overall or somewhere in the draft, he is a guy that can help a rookie quarterback. And if you're thinking about building a Super Bowl franchise, it's best to build out your roster and then plug in a rookie quarterback if you're trying to put them into a position to win, versus someone like the Carolina Panthers. They dismantled their team in order to get the quarterback, and now they're really struggling because there's no good pieces around it. Let's build an amazing engine, and let's put the driver in the seat when it's ready to roll. I think that's the best timing that you can have as an NFL franchise, and I think Kwesi is more than likely trying to do that right now.
Yep. Here's the last thing, too, on this the trade idea.
Yeah.
And then I want to go back to talking about like what it's going to take to re-sign him. I'm just quickly looking up just stats. All right, let's just do the last, 22 and 23 for him. Obviously, that's all we can do. So he's got 392. Let's call 400 catches. Jeez, that's a lot of catches. 392 catches in 2 years, man. That is the production is insane. Anyway. If you did his averages for receptions, yards, and touchdowns, and did it on a per year basis, and then he gets traded somewhere, I would play the under in his next 2 years. If you set the over under as his averages in the first 2 years, I would play under in every category in the next 2 years, because it's hard enough to get drafted to the right team, be a good fit, have a good quarterback, and be productive and stay healthy and all that. It's hard enough to do that one time. Now you're hoping that wherever you get traded to is a similarly good fit with a similarly good offense, with a similarly good quarterback, and you stay similarly healthy.
Yep.
Like from a career production standpoint to Jefferson, I'd be like, you better be careful about that, getting traded, going to another team. Yep. Odds are it's a decrease in your production. That's what the
grass
odds
is
are.
Greener on the other side of the fence.
I mean,
I could not agree more. And you're not even factoring in the play caller. I think there are teams that have amazing weapons, but then from a play calling standpoint, things fall apart. Now, all due respect to the OC back in 2018, but when Kirk Cousins came here, I believe that we did not properly install the right system, and we spent probably half a season trying to figure it out, and we wasted such opportunity. I think a lot of people put that entire blame on Kirk Cousins' shoulders, and there's definitely some blame to throw there. But at the end of the day, it shows how valuable your scheme and your play calling is. You can have amazing weapons, but if you're not all on the same page in a system that meets where the players are at, it's all going to fall apart. So to your point, that could blow up in JJ's face, and he could really dwindle as a player. I mean, he's obviously an amazing player, don't get me wrong, but to your point, from his production standpoint, he's not going to achieve the type of numbers that he had if he goes to a lesser team.
He's not.
Even someone like the Carolina Panthers or even the Washington Commanders, teams that have the ability to pay him, they don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to leverage.
No, they don't. I mean, so, his first 4 seasons, 88 catches, 108, 128, and then 68.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's about the last 2 years, it's been 98 catches a year. Now, I don't know, let's say even a good scenario, like he goes to the Chargers, he gets traded to the Chargers, or he gets traded, like there are still things that could get in the way of that, and he would be short on his numbers. But more than likely, it's not going to be he's going to play with Mahomes or Herbert or someone like that. It's more than likely he's going to play with someone of similar or lesser caliber to Cousins.
Yep.
Most likely.
Yep.
So I think they need to focus on staying together. Now, what will help them is the news that came about over the weekend that I think you're going to like, and it's the salary cap. Now, the NFL releasing its salary cap for the upcoming season is akin to Christmas morning for Gyles, okay, everyone, because he's all about the numbers and the figures and the cap and the cash over cap and how we're going to make it all fit and how we can do this and that. So it's about a $30 million increase year over year to the salary cap, which is the largest year over year increase in the cap's history. Mm-hmm. So this is good news for teams from the standpoint of retaining players or signing players. And it's good news for the players from the standpoint of it's more money for them. So to me, I've always been very confident that Jefferson would be re-signed by the Vikings. In fact, I think they were very close to it last year. Mm-hmm. But now I'm even more confident that it'll get done because of the increased cap room. It's the largest increase year over year that we've ever seen. I just don't see why it can't get done.
Because now there's so much extra wiggle room. Now I do think that the primary modus operandi for that cap increasing beyond the fact that advertising dollars are being directed more towards the NFL is obviously the inflated contracts from a quarterback perspective. In the last few years, the average annual value has gone from the mid-20s to the mid-50s, right? So that is accelerating at a very rapid pace, and the salary cap obviously needs to keep up pace to keep those things rolling. But with that being said, there's a time, in an intermediate time that takes to actually massage in, and I think the Vikings are going to be able to truly leverage that. Where if you got creative, which I truly believe the Vikings are, when you look at all the smart people they have inside Egan, I think they actually have the ability to re-sign Danielle, re-sign JJ. I think if they're able to really play bullnose hard dog negotiation, they may be able to sign Kirk Cousins to a 1-year deal. I don't know if that's the case, but I think if Kirk Cousins is willing to deal, I think they could sign it for a 1-year deal, draft a rookie quarterback, and have amazing production this year and enter 2025 with an amazing infrastructure. I truly believe with this increase, they have the ability to go balls to the wall with all these different players. I really do. Yeah. Now, I mean, there's a lot of different things that need to happen, but the ability is there. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that could happen. So let's spin this forward now to what we kind of wanted to talk about with folks. I went actually onto the Vikings website and saw that they had an interview with Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus, PFF. He's sort of a salary cap analyst, but he's got a Vikings bent to him. I believe he was an intern with the Vikings, and I'm going to feel bad if he was there when I was there. But I don't remember him, but I know who he is. He does great work on PFF, and I know when I mentioned it to you, Gyles, you knew him. So, or knew of him.
Follow him regularly.
Yeah. Okay. So he is on the re-signed Danielle Hunter bandwagon with you and I. He might have said they can't afford not to do it, is what he said, which is like, one of my mom's famous lines and my wife's famous line, like when they see a deal at the mall or the store, it's like, well, we can't afford not to buy this, like it's such a good deal, it's like, okay, right. But I actually think he's right. I think you have to have Hunter back because the cost of not having Hunter is greater than the cost of having him. If you factor in like how you're going to rush the passer now, right? You still have to sign someone. And you're going to sign someone for nearly as much, but he's not nearly as good. So from that standpoint, it's costing you more than if you would have just given Danielle Hunter the Brinks truck. And he's actually bullish on this free agent class in general, Gyles, where the Vikings have needs. He said this actually, when you look at strengths and weaknesses of the roster for the Vikings, and then the draft class and the free agent class, this matches up very well for the Vikings. Where they need help, the free agent class and the draft class are strong. He really likes the interior defensive lineman free agent class. The three names he mentioned were Justin Matabuke from Baltimore, Christian Wilkins from Miami, and DJ Reader from Cincinnati. Now, I think that he's a little too low on DJ Reader. I think DJ Reader is maybe the best of that group. And I have a feeling that another person that we're going to talk about later in this episode of the Wobcast 2.0 also really likes DJ Reader, so the Vikings will be in competition with that person and his new team for DJ Reader.
Yeah.
But I think those are three very good names for the Vikings, and I would love it if DJ Reader was on this roster, along with Danielle Hunter. But I thought it was interesting that he was so bullish on the free agent class where the Vikings have need, and he went right to the interior of the defensive line and talking about that. So I will open the floor to you now, Gyles, after talking for so long about that. But a fun, interesting piece of commentary from Brad Spielberger on the Vikings website right now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it needs to be explicitly stated when it comes to Danielle Hunter that if the Vikings do not re-sign him, they and us as fans need to be prepared for the Vikings defense to go back to a bottom 5 unit. Yeah. And that is both because I am high on Danielle Hunter and his production. He had one of the most underrated seasons last year, both in his history, but also the general NFL. But I think it's also important to really analyze how the Minnesota Vikings defense is predicated and built. And it is built on pressure and the illusion of pressure. And I think it was very clear this last year that they did an amazing job at the illusion of pressure. And the problem that ultimately became found out towards the end of the season is that our team wasn't built to be able to win one-on-one reps when it came to our defensive line. They just simply were not. And that exposed the back end, and the entire thing kind of fell apart. Now, I'm a big believer in Brian Flores and his ability to be creative and to really be a magician of sorts, to be an illusionist. But at the end of the day, he can only be an illusionist for so long. And if you expect our secondary to hold up, unless you're going to go sign a lockdown corner, we'll talk about that later with Xavier Howard maybe, with being released by the Dolphins. Unless you plan on going that route, you need to be able to absolutely 110% every rep be able to win one-on-one matchups. And if you plan on getting rid of Danielle Hunter, what are you replacing him with? Because he was the only guy on our defensive line that was able to actually win one-on-ones. And I need 2 or 3, even 4 people to be able to win one-on-ones if you actually attempt to go win a championship. So if you lose him, you're now literally going back to square one. I wanted to keep Danielle Hunter. I think you need to re-sign him, go draft somebody, and re-sign somebody via free agency. It'd be amazing if you get like a Chris Jones on the interior and also have Danielle Hunter. I don't think that's possible with the salary cap. But to your point, if you could get a DJ Reader, have a Danielle Hunter, and draft somebody high from a defensive interior standpoint, that is how you're going to be able to win one-on-one matchups and actually truly be able to exploit the creativity that you have in Brian Flores. 100% believe that. So to your point, you cannot afford to lose Danielle Hunter. Full stop.
Yep, I agree. They got to bring him back, and I think they've got room to go get an elite interior defender as well. The names we mentioned are definitely viable candidates, as are some others. Sticking with free agency, I want to go to the PFF mock draft as well, but let's stick with free agency first. You saw the Bears release Cody Whitehair and Eddie Jackson a week or so ago. Might be 10 days by now. They saved $21.5 million against their cap by doing that. Now, I think these are true salary cap casualties. I think that in a perfect world, they would retain those 2 players, but they didn't find the cost-benefit analysis worked out in the direction of parting ways with those 2 players. I think they both have something left to give teams. So I'm not going down this road because I think those are candidates for the Vikings to sign, although maybe they are, especially in the case of Cody Whitehair. But I'm going at it from the standpoint of similar exercise here for the Vikings with current members of the team. Now, one of our favorite websites is Spotrac. So those listening or watching who don't know about this website, go to it, Spotrac. It's a salary cap analysis for professional sports, not just the NFL, for all sports, but it's particularly relevant for our discussions because of its NFL information. They have a new feature, at least new for me, I haven't seen it yet, where you can choose to cut or restructure certain players' contracts, and it will calculate what the new cap hit is for that player and what the team's cap room is. So I was messing around with that a little bit and thinking about you while I was doing it. And, there are some things you can do with Harrison Smith when it comes to restructure or release, to Harrison Phillips when it comes to restructure or release, and to Brian O'Neill when it comes to a restructure where you can save up to $17, $18, $19 million. While still retaining 2 or 3 of those players. So I encourage you all to go and mess around with that on Spotrac. But thoughts, Gyles, on restructuring Brian O'Neill's contract to reduce that number, and then parting ways or restructuring the contracts of Harrison Smith and Harrison Phillips to free up some cap space?
Yeah, 100%. I think starting with Brian O'Neill, I actually am a believer that his entire contract was built specifically to restructure this offseason based on the escalator that lives 100%. And I would say at this specific point in the contract, when you look at the cap hit. I truly believe this is what was meant to happen. I don't think that you can afford to lose him. When you look at the Minnesota Vikings, whether you have Kirk Cousins or you draft a rookie or you keep both, right? I think you absolutely need two amazing bookend tackles, and Brian O'Neill is that. He's clearly a top 10 tackle in the NFL when he's healthy. So I do think this is the time to restructure and kick that can down the road and give yourself even more cap space to be able to go sign all the right players, especially if it means giving yourself the ability to have Danielle Hunter or someone like that. So definitely restructure him, keep him. I think he needs to retire in purple. He's a guy that has consistently been proven to be amazing at every rep. So keep him around at a lower cap at this year. Moving on to Harrison Phillips. This is one where I want to keep him in the building unless you can find a better player. Because I've talked about this before a lot, but I think when you're looking at premier positions or positions of importance, I am never a fan of getting worse to get cheaper. I'm always a fan of getting better. That should always be the top priority. Better first, cheaper second. Now, if you can get better and cheaper, that's always the top priority. But that's one of those positions where we're already doing so bad from the defensive interior standpoint that unless you're going to get better, let's keep him around. No, I think I would restructure him and obviously to keep him there because I don't think his performance is like show-stopping amazing, but I also think you could do far worse. Now, I would actually be of the frame of mind, if we can replace him and get better, let's do that. I would prefer to do that because our defensive interior is something that needs to be upgraded. But unless you can upgrade, I do prefer to keep him around. I don't want to just see how things go and not get better. So that's kind of my position there. So hopefully we can get better. In that case, will be willing to let him walk. But in that other case, let's make sure we restructure. Yeah. And then moving on to Harrison Smith, that is one where I think I'm willing to have it be a cap casualty. I think his age and his comments publicly have indicated that he is on the latter end of his career. He's even talked about how he's not going to really announce his retirement. He's just going to slowly walk off into the sunset and just not really talk about it. And I took that as kind of a forewarning that he's going to be retiring this year. So I do expect him to not suit up in purple. He's been obviously an amazing piece of the Minnesota Vikings, a cornerstone when it comes to the culture and the leadership of the Minnesota Vikings. So kind of sad to see him go and a new era entering, but I do expect him to no longer be suiting up in purple, whether that's us cutting him or his retirement, but I don't expect him to come back, which obviously gives you a little flexibility when it comes to cap space. Ultimately, that will be accelerated, so that's definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to salary cap and cap hit this specific year. But I think it's also important to mention that Lewis Cine has weirdly stayed on this roster, even though his performance has not been great. So I'm going to make a prediction. Either he is cut in the very, very near future where he's not on the NFL roster, or ultimately he has been slowly recovering from his injury back in London, and they think he has an amazing upside that they are really slowly nursing back to health. I think there's nowhere in between. He's like a starter level caliber safety, or he is off the roster. And that's obviously brought into the conversation. If Harrison Smith is no longer on the roster, we obviously need another starting safety.
Okay. You went to that's the end for Harrison Smith thing. I was a little more like, I think maybe one more year with him. I think he's got one more year left, but you're suggesting maybe not. I think you can reach. Now he's got to be willing to do this. I think you can get it from 19 million down to 11 and save 8 million in cap space there. Would you want him for 11.5 million?
Oh, man.
Or is that too much?
Personality-wise, I do, because he is such a cornerstone. But when you look at performance, I feel like that's still too much.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I hate saying that. I mean, Harry would hit me in the face if he heard me say that. I think he's a great guy. But I think performance-wise, 11 mil is still too much. He had a pretty significant drop-off in performance last year. Now, I think that he's a guy that can call protections out and really be kind of that second dot player, so to speak. But I don't know. I still think that's too much. You call me out if I'm being too outlandish here, but I feel like that is one where he might be a cap casualty. Am I ludicrous here?
No, you're not ludicrous. You're not. you might be a pragmatist here and realistic. And at some point, you just got to make the jump and do it, and live life without Harry on defense. It's just at some point it's got to happen. Is this the year? We'll find out. But I just think from a leadership and organize everyone and an experience standpoint, you lose a lot when you lose them. And I think you kind of, I don't want to say you got lucky, but like with Cam Bynum stepping up and playing as well as he did, like you got to feel really good about that. And can you do that again at the same position? I just don't know. I think the drop-off's bad. I know Harrison's drop-off from where he played at for a really long time to where he was last year was a significant drop-off.
Yeah.
But I still think where he is at is good, is really good, and you can win with it. So I'd be interested in exploring the idea. Now, the other thing is, if there's another drop off with Harry, that's a bad one. That like you don't want to be a part of that one. Like that's a problem. That's like you went from like we got to avoid 20. Like the other offense is like we got to avoid 22 out there. He's going to kill us. To where's 22? We got to find him and go at him. Right. So you don't want to be in that situation. And so if your analysis of him is that drop off is imminent, then you got to move on. Then it's got to be time to go. And you save some, you do something very dignified and you part ways, or there's a retirement or whatever. But if anyone can really feel strongly and make a compelling case that he's got one more year left of where he was last year, then I'd be interested in keeping him. Now, you and I are both very analytical, but also both we love to just watch it and have gut reactions. And we're looking at the same player and the same data set and have slightly different opinions on this. And that just goes to show you that the act of building a roster is as much of an art as it is a science, right? Yep. Two people can look at the same thing and think two different, have two different ideas. So we will see what happens here. Either way, what a career for Harrison Smith, even if it's over for the Vikings. If he's got one more year, it'll be fun to watch. But it's fun to monkey around with that that part of the Spotrac website. I think it's called Manage Roster. Yeah, so you go to it's really it's fun. All right, let's go to really quickly the Pro Football Focus's first mock draft, Gyles. I thought was interesting. I made a few notes on it. 4 quarterbacks went in their top 10, including J.J. McCarthy at number 10, one spot in front of Minnesota. So then Minnesota took an edge rusher, the Florida State edge, Jared Verse, and then Minnesota also traded up back into the first round and got Bo Nix at number 30. Now, conceptually, I think that's fine to put into a mock draft, and if the Vikings did that conceptually, that'd be great. And I don't think it's realistic how PFF did it, because they had Minnesota giving up number 42, so moving from 42 to 30, and all they had to give up was a third-round pick next year. I think it would take more than that, and it was with Baltimore.
Say that feels very light.
So if you're Baltimore and Minnesota says, hey, we want to come up 12 spots into the first round, you know why they're doing that, right? They're coming up in there to get that fifth year option, right? Yes. To get a quarterback. So as you've talked about before, Gyles, when the team that you're dealing with knows your intention is to get a quarterback, the price tag goes up, right? Invariably.
There's a tax of sorts that gets applied. Of course. Like,
that's a good way to put it.
Pay here.
Yep, there's a tax. Yep. So I think it's unrealistic that that's all it would take is a third-round pick. But conceptually, I like the idea. Rick Spielman did it with Teddy Bridgewater, and that's how the Vikings got Teddy at, I think it was 31 or might have been number 32. It might have been the last pick of the first round. So interesting, I thought there that's what PFF had. They had 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10, which is a high number. And I think the J.J. McCarthy thing is, people love him because he's a winner and they'll take him, or people are just like, this guy's no good. He was on a great team with Jim Harbaugh. He's not a first round pick, whatever. It's J.J. McCarthy's a love-hate situation there. But, kind of, food for thought and fun to look at either way.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I will say, if it does go down this route, this tells me that Kirk Cousins walked in free agency, that they're going Bo Nix, because Honestly, I'm not a huge Bo Nix guy. When I'm looking to build my roster around, I'd much rather reposition your draft board to try to trade up higher. But ultimately, if this is where it goes, I mean, we'll give it a try, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not in love with this quarterback specifically. But the ironic part here is that obviously PFF does multiple mock drafts across a lot of different analysts, and I forget who it was. I don't remember exactly who it was, but another PFF mock draft came out recently, and at pick 11, they had the Vikings going with Bo Nix. So there's a weird correlation there. I don't know if there's insider knowledge that we're not privy to, but 2 mock drafts with Bo Nix going to the Vikings, both pick 30 and pick 11. I don't know. That's interesting.
I just can't see Bo Nix being drafted by the Vikings. I just don't see it.
No,
it just wouldn't make sense to me. It wouldn't fit Kwesi's profile. It's not the type of player he would draft. And maybe I'm dead wrong. Like, obviously Kwesi listens to the Wobcast 2.0, so he's listening right now laughing at us because he's got Bo Nix circled. I have no idea. It would shock me though. That would surprise me.
Yeah.
Agreed. But we will see. There will be more mock drafts to come, and then ultimately the real NFL draft will happen. But fun time of year right now, Gyles. Lots of fodder out there, lots of hypotheticals, and now deadlines are coming up, right? Because there's combine, there's the window to designate and put tenders and tags on people. The new league year is starting. The pre-league year negotiating window is starting, and then, so deadlines are coming up here on the calendar, which means transactions will be happening as well, and it's a lot of fun to sit here and talk about it and analyze it. That's what I have, though, for today's show. Anything left in your notebook that we didn't tackle?
No, just excited to see what comes out of the combine this week. This is the unofficial negotiation window. I think people are naive if they don't think conversations start at the combine before free agency technically starts. So I think things are really going to start rumbling up. I do expect some team, maybe this is Minnesota Vikings, to trade up before the draft starts. I do expect the board to get a little bit mixed up here. So excited to see how this thing falls here over the next few weeks.
Yep, me too. And this is not the last Wobcast 2.0 of the week, everybody. Gyles and I are going to be recording a season-long position review episode, and we will focus on the cornerbacks of the Minnesota Vikings from 2023 as we analyze their performance, what went wrong, what went right, and how can they make it better for 2024. So that episode of the Wobcast 2.0 will be dropping later in the week. If you're not already, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the Wobcast 2.0. You can find us wherever you find all your other favorite football content, YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, all those other places. Come and find us and join the conversation. Once you do, we'll see you there. Until next time, and on behalf of Gyles, this is Wobby signing off for now. Skol Vikings.